Good morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you happen to be in the world, watching live here on YouTube. Welcome to the Model 3 Owners Club podcast, episode number 1 for May 10th, 2018. And I'm your host, Trevor Page, founder of the Model 3 Owners Club, and thanks for joining us this fine Thursday evening. We have some regular guests joining us this evening to talk all things Tesla and the Model 3. But before we get into this, I just want to say a few words about this new endeavor of ours. A few months ago, I kind of put the Model 3 updates on hiatus because with, deliveries beginning in the U.S. and owners doing videos, I kind of felt like, the updates had kind of run their course a little bit. So I took some time to think about what I wanted to do and what direction we wanted to go with the channel going forward. Because my wife and I are kind of waiting for a standard Model 3, which is not supposed to be here until 2019. So I wasn't going to be offering much in terms of video and content about the car. But after meeting some great friends while on vacation who are actual owners of Model 3, I thought, well, there you go. There's my answer. So we're going to do a regular podcast. The idea is to do this every week, hopefully. If we haven't end up doing this maybe every 2 weeks, you'll understand why. And the idea is to get them on the show and let them talk about their experiences so we can discuss all things Model 3 and Tesla happenings. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to some of our first guests. The first guest that I have is Michael Bodner. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Trev.
Okay. Mike, where are you from?
South Florida. Sitting in a Model 3 right now.
Well, how appropriate. That's wonderful. And our next guest is Eric Camacho, and he is in Southern Florida as well, are you not?
I certainly am.
And you just took delivery of your Model 3, 2 weeks ago?
It'll be 2 weeks ago tomorrow.
Excellent. Good. And how you get along with it?
I love it.
You love it? That's awesome. Great. Okay. Well, our next guest is Ian Pavelko. And Ian is in Montreal. Say hi to the folks, Ian.
Bonjour tout le monde! Bienvenue à Montréal! And welcome to the Mad Cave.
Oh, well, very good. And Ian, you don't have a Model 3 yet.
No, I would be what you'd refer to as the skunk at the garden party here. I don't quite know how I made the list, but here I am faking it. So hopefully I'll contribute something to the conversation. We're not quite sure what yet, but hey, isn't that part of fun?
Yeah, I guess so. So I just want to say thanks for everybody for joining in, and we're just kind of be a little bit loosey-goosey, I think, for the first episode because, we got to get our ears wet a little bit on this whole process. We've got some new software, so it's going to be a little weird at first. If we happen to drop out, well, I apologize. We'll get this thing sorted out. So today we just want to kind of get our feet wet a little bit and just kind of get some ideas of what people are experiencing, and we have some topics to talk about. So I think the first one I think that we need to discuss a little bit is the Tesla financial call that happened last week. And there's some really interesting tidbits that come out in there because, usually at the financial calls, they're always the best place to really get juicy tidbits about what's going on with the Model 3 and the production and so on and so forth. So, I don't think we really want to get into the financial aspect so much because that's not really my thing and probably not yours either. We're really more interested in what's going on with the Model 3. So, some interesting numbers have come out. Of course, production is certainly starting to pick up. We're not at the 5,000 number again yet, but it is certainly coming in soon. I think they've produced something like 2,270 at a sustained rate. I'm sure they're well past that now. And some other stuff that came about. I mean, the other thing that had come about some time was Tesla or Elon's comments, of course, on Twitter in that CBS piece that they did with Gayle King, where she talked about, the automation situation, and Elon dropped some bombs on us. And, of course, he said they reduced some of the automation. So as it turns out, one of the items that they had trouble with, of course, and you've probably seen this, was the what they call Flufferbot. Yeah, that was pretty epic. And so as it turns out, what they were trying to automate was putting this fiberglass blanket. Now, if you look at a Model S or a Model X, I don't know if you ever had. Have you ever seen the tops of a battery pack on the Model X or the Model S?
I have.
Yeah, I have. Okay.
Yeah.
So they put this fiberglass mat on it, and Elon called it fluff. And sorry about that, Ian. I'll get you cut out. I'll fix up your thing here in a second. So anyways, what they were trying to do was trying to automate this picking up of this fiberglass mat and put it on top of the battery pack using a vision system. So as it turns out, I guess the robots weren't all that great at picking up soft things, and hands were better at that. So they took that robot out and they put people on the line. The other one, too, was something about the battery pack. Oh, I know what it was. The front of the Model 3 battery pack has a plate, a blanking plate, where they put 2 of the high voltage lines for the front motor. Of course, all-wheel drive's not in production yet. So they had the standard battery pack, and they would cut out the hole, and then they would put this blanking plate in. Well, it turns out they're not making the cars with all-wheel drive right now, so they eliminated that step, and that cut out some of the bottlenecks, of course, and the issues with the modules were kind of sorted out too. So that really kind of opened things up at the Gigafactory. What were the other things? You guys remember what they were talking about? Something about the paint shop too?
I don't remember. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so back to the Flufferbot, I know not to go back, but real quick, one of the things that I thought was really interesting on that was that not only did Elon say hands would be better, but also the fact that he sits there and looks at it and says, do we even need this piece? Right. I thought was pretty interesting. One, we're over-automating potentially, but we're over-automating something we might not even need. And I like the fact that he puts eyes on it. It's not just, how do we do this better? Do we even need this? What does the car really need? I thought that was an interesting piece to that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, so I think in some ways what's kind of been going on is that they had these grand plans of putting all the automation in as much as they could, and then just kind of taking the some of the teething problems they've been having. But as it turns out, I think they went a little too overboard, and they had to back off a little bit because production's more important. It seems to me in some ways that Tesla might have been better off doing, maybe a pilot line. Well, they did say they did a pilot line, but I think in some ways it would have been better if they had, 2 lines in parallel. One that was going to do the full automation and then work it out, and then one with kind of like more people. But I don't know. I'm not a production expert. I watch lots of YouTube videos, but what do you do when you live in a shoe, right? Anything else on the financial call?
Well, I thought it was interesting. There was a point where the questions that were coming in from the investors, from Barclays and others, were to the point where he was kind of getting tired of that line of questioning. And there was that YouTuber, was it Galileo Russell, who decided to chime in, and he was just like firing away with question after question after question. And Elon was like, he had his entire attention, and it was like, all right, we're gonna focus on this, because talk about the science of EVs, talk about the charging infrastructure, talk about the future of Tesla, not so much from a numbers perspective, but more just in terms of an operational perspective. Really sort of shifted the tone of that call, and a lot of writers focused on that. But I thought it was great to hear someone so young and so invigorated by what Tesla's doing just be like, just bring me more information. It kind of, thrust all that at us and see what we have coming forward.
Yeah. Ian, any thoughts on the financial call?
Well, I agree 100% with Eric. I mean, there's been huge fallout both ways. There's a lot of people, I think mostly like us, that would be excited by the fact that Galileo got in so many good questions and sort of shifted the whole tone of the call. It's the first time that the little retail investors like us sort of had any sort of voice at all, because apparently he'd crowdsourced a lot of the questions. They weren't just his. If I understand correctly, he was pulling in all kinds of stuff from people who follow him, etc. So it was nice to see sort of a good mix of people's interests represented in his call. Of course, the flip side of that was Elon took a lot of heat for shutting down, the traditional guys who were, let's face it, trying to poke some holes. I mean, as soon as you saw them go down the line of, well, how many orders are there right now that are, how many of the reservations are still sticking? Where they're going with that. And I think he smelled that right away. And, that's why he shut him down. So, was he right to just sort of hang up the phone on him? Well, a little bit of politics involved in that. But overall, I mean, I get where he's coming from. When you look at like the enormous amount of hate this company generates from all of the vested interests, the powers that be that are against it, you can kind of see where you're going to develop a little bit of thin skin. I think he's just kind of reached a point where it's like, it's enough. You guys are constantly trying to stick a screwdriver in the door here to pry something out that isn't there or massively exaggerate it. And I kind of get that. So, you could debate endlessly on whether how he executed it was right or wrong. But, maybe I'm being too much of a fanboy, but I totally get why he wanted to do that. And I really liked Galileo's line of questions. And I think it was a hell of a lot more informative for the average person.
And I think was that there was the focus on autopilot and the news has been on all the crashes that have happened and whether or not autopilot was engaged and whether it was part of the accident and that sort of thing. And certainly with the number of Tesla vehicles in the market and because of how much in the news Tesla is, a lot of folks try to focus on that some form or fashion. To me, what was interesting about the call was noting that they're going to start reporting their crash statistics regarding autopilot publicly, make those records known to everybody, and then update it every quarter. Now, is that going to change perception out of the gate? Maybe not. But at least saying we're going to make that public record and allow you to then see for yourselves the data we're providing to, National Highway Safety Board or anybody else, like that's important, I think, to start talking about that.
Yeah, I think some of my takeaways from the whole situation was, Elon will tolerate financial questions because, he understands finance, but it's not his thing. He likes engineering. And I could tell when he went to Galileo's questions that you could almost see his face light up. It's like, oh, wow, some great questions. You know what I mean? That's kind of my takeaway that I got from his comments. The other thing, too, is I think in a lot of ways, I really think Tesla needs a COO. Like SpaceX, where they have Gwynne Shotwell kind of running the business, and Elon is in the back doing engineering and technology and forward thinking and all that other stuff. And it just seems to me that, Tesla could better use Elon's resources if they were to free him up to do what he's best at and let somebody else be more the front person. I don't know. That's just kind of my thinking. Anybody want to chime in on that?
Well, you look at a company like Apple when they had Steve Jobs, and obviously with Tim Cook behind him as a COO, I think that's a really, really valid point.
Yeah, I kind of agree. In a lot of ways, Steve really was, the voice of Apple. The difference, though, of course, is that, Steve had the charisma and the speaking abilities to get up in front of a crowd, something that Elon has charisma in his own way, but his public speaking, even though it has been getting better, you can tell that, his mind is about, 3 miles down the road ahead of his mouth. So he struggles a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, there's something nice about the fact that Elon gets up and he's very off the cuff. I really appreciate that. But I'm just thinking from a day-to-day routine, I think it would be better off for him to be, relieved of some of the day-to-day stuff. I don't know how the heck he gets things done with, the kind of hours that he works and stuff. So anyhow, anything else we want to add? But maybe we can get on to the...
I think the production numbers, one of the big takeaways, and I might be misquoting it, so hopefully one of you caught the number better, but I had noted that the battery packs used to take 7 hours per pack about 3 weeks ago, and now they're down to 17 minutes. I hope I heard that correctly, but that is a huge improvement.
It is.
Along the way toward 3,000 cars a week and then eventually up to 5,000.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's a huge difference for them to get the production run. So, a lot of people were saying, that Tesla would never be able to meet their production goals. And here we are, they're a little late and they're behind, but there's no doubt in my mind that they will certainly reach, the 5,000 goal within a handful of months. I think the 10,000 goal, though, on the other hand, is going to take some time because they're going to have to build another line. I don't think the current line is capable of 10,000 at this point. So we'll see what that happens. Anything else before we move on to the next piece of news?
Well, I was just going to mention the 5,000 per month. There was something that came out just this week, wasn't there, that someone had gotten a hold of some letter that had gone out to the vendors, and they were like back and forth. Some sort of a conversation that confirmed that they were all being asked to make sure they provide at least 5,000 per week volumes into the factory for July. So that seemed to track with this is actually going to happen. It's about the only thing I could add to it. It seems to be encouraging at this point.
Yeah, I think I had a conversation on another podcast last night, and it was kind of brought up. And I think part of the situation is Tesla has not been managing their supply chain all that well. So what they have is too many suppliers doing sub, and I made a comment that I thought it was more like the aerospace industry, and it's kind of like, the cost plus situation all the time. There's just too many. So he said they were going to scrape off the barnacles because the barnacles have barnacles. So there's going to be some shakeups and some reorganization at Tesla. They did say that, I think, in the investor letter, that they were going to do some reorganization. So I think that's part of it. So anyhow, I think we should move on to the other bit of news. We're going to kind of do these in random order. I want to talk about the situation about people make a big deal about, the panel gap situation. I've seen some early Model 3s and I've seen some recent Model 3s, and there's been a distinct improvement in the fit and finish on the car. And that's for sure. Now, no car is perfect. Even other manufacturers, of course, there's no such thing as a perfect car. I think too much noise is spent on Tesla's panel gap situation. However, there are a few little things that have been coming up. One of them is this concept of, well, not concept, but some observations that, particularly with the white cars, we're seeing some discoloration on the rear bumpers. Now, honestly, I haven't really looked at them all that close, but there's been a lot of pictures, and sometimes it's maybe a little trick of the eye, but it seems like some of them are exhibiting some premature yellowing. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I was just going to say, so my wife drives a white car, different manufacturer, doesn't matter which one, but she's got that effect. Same on the rear bumper, you see it in certain lights. I don't know, but just for people who are closer to the car industry or in paint can probably speak to it a little better than I, but it's definitely something I've seen. Not that makes it right. Trev, I would ask you, White Knight, even though this is a Model 3 show or a Model 3 Focus show, how's White Knight?
My White Knight is doing very well. I did have some early issues when I first took delivery of the car. They were all fixed under warranty. It was Tesla bent over backwards. My passenger side door was the worst affected. Don't forget, I took delivery of my car just before a really cold snap that we had here in Canada. It was like the coldest I can remember in a long, long time. And the window regulator had failed. So at one point, when the window went down, it would only come halfway up, and it would not come up any further, and we had to yank it up. And then a subsequent time, we rolled the window down. It went all the way down and stayed down. And I could not get it to come up no matter what I did. So we made an appointment with Tesla. Very next day, they took it in, they fixed the problem. And then the very next day, when you open the door, it does that little half-inch drop just to clear the trim. And it stayed there. It would not come back up. So I went back in the next day, and they fixed that again. And then we were having some problems, of course, with the actuator on the door. On the Model X, the front doors are motorized as well. And on the passenger side, the door would open, but sometimes it wouldn't close all the way. Like, you could close it, and it would do the catch and pull it in. So anyways, they changed that regulator. And not the regulator, the actuator, which is the little bit that moves the door in and out. And then I had a door seal on the passenger side that came unstuck on the bottom. They use automotive tape. But other than that, those were the main issues, and they've fixed all that stuff. I did notice a little something a couple weeks ago, and I haven't brought it in for an appointment, but under certain lighting conditions, there's a scratch in my windshield, a little, like a half moon, in the opposite direction. Like, the windshield wipers go like this, but I have a scratch that goes like this. So it's not a windshield wiper, and I've touched it, and I can't feel it on the inside or the outside. It's almost like it's inside the glass. Now, it's only when the bright light is shining on it, so it's not that big of a deal, but I know where it is, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know what I mean? So
it will slowly drive you mad.
Yeah. So I talked to the service advisor, and he said, well, the next time you bring it in, we'll take a look at it. If we have to, we'll change the windshield. So whatever. But other than that, no, the car's been solid. I haven't had any issues. Got, nice software updates, and, things are improving that ways. So let's segue into that. So how about you, Eric and Mike? Maybe we'll start with Mike, because you have a little bit more recent experience with some issues. Why don't you tell us what your experience with your Model 3 has been like?
Sure, absolutely. So Trev was actually with me, did the video of my delivery of my car, which is fantastic. It's 5,000s VIN, so still pretty early. Exterior on the car was seemingly flawless, no gap issues whatsoever. Had a couple of spots in the paint that weren't perfect. Drove the car for 2 months before even bringing it up to my service advisor. And never for a second did they question something you did, something you touched the car with. They took care of everything. My tint shop scratched the chrome trim around the window. I asked for a quote on it, telling them that my tint shop scratched it. They said, please don't worry about it. We'll take care of that too. Amazing customer service. On the inside of the car, I had a couple of, I had the A-pillar bulge, which is the thread on the forum. Seems about 75% of people so far replying to my poll have had this. Nothing major at all. You notice it because there's a black line around the windshield that kind of covers up the internal bits behind it. So it gives you a good gauge that it's not perfectly straight. They replaced that. I got the car back today. So I feel like the car was delivered to me again today after being away for 4 days with a little bit of paint work and trim pieces. I couldn't be happier. But just a couple of service items, like I mentioned, including things that I should have had to pay for. And just the bend over backwards, got a Model S85 loaner, autopilot, the works, everything I needed. It was just fantastic experience.
Yeah, my experience with Tesla has always been exemplary. Their service has just been like they bend over backwards. They never question anything. It's like, yes, sir, we'll take a look at it. Or, it's not really critical right now. We don't have enough time, but the next time we come in, we'll definitely take care of it. They get a really good list. And it's quite a bit different from my experience in the past with other manufacturers. Like my last car was a Ford. And every time I took it in for service, it was like you're talking to a desk person and then, we'll pass the information into the back. And, half the time, the mechanic didn't do something right or wasn't fixed properly. My experience with Tesla has been when I bring the car in, it's always been 2, maybe 3 technicians. They come up and they talk to you. And in every case, it's always the technician that actually does the work. So I found that to be very nice. That was pretty cool. I was always blown away. And they always, went over backwards for me. Eric, any issues with your car?
So I've only been driving the car now for it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow, and I haven't really like kind of sat down and like looked at every little inch of my car. But from just clear observation, the gaps look pretty clean. If there is, the smallest of discrepancies from one side to the other, you really can't tell by the naked eye. You would really need to kind of measure it out with some special caliper. But what I did notice yesterday is in looking at my trunk, it appears that the driver's side between the taillight and the trunk is not as flush as you would like it to be. Versus the passenger side, and it's like it's a clear, tangible discrepancy. So I might want to get that taken in to kind of have them take a look at it. But otherwise, the car looks perfect. Even in the interior, everything looks nice and clean. Nothing appears to be loose. I certainly haven't noticed the A-pillar issue that Michael just referenced. But yeah, I mean, my VIN is just below 13,000. So obviously there's no knowing what the exact number of vehicles that were made between Michael's VIN and mine, but assuming there's been at least 6,000 to 7,000 VINs in between them, then that's it's a pretty good improvement from then till now.
It'll be quite interesting to see what happens because we're starting to see VINs in the 39,000s now, I think, something like that. I know some of the ones that are coming here to Toronto are 29,000, somewhere in there. So they've been increasing. Just a quick question. How about you, Ian? I know you don't have a Model 3, but you do have a Chevy Volt.
I do.
And what year is it? And have you had any issues and stuff that you want to talk about, seeing that it's an EV as well? So let's compare notes.
Well, the Volt's been an interesting experience for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's my first American car. I mean, in 35, 37 years of driving, whatever it is, I've never actually owned an American car. They've all been, about a dozen German and maybe 2 Japanese. So, not that I actively didn't want one. It's just they never quite made the car that I wanted or whatever all else. So there was this curiosity when I got it. Okay, what is this going to be like? And it wasn't even a planned purchase. I mean, this is something that replaced my Audi A4 that got destroyed. I got rear-ended on the highway last year in a pretty serious accident. And I had actually talked my girlfriend Brigitte into one. I said, look, you're not ready to commit to EV. I got the solution for you. This will get you to work and back. And if all hell breaks loose and you can't charge, it'll just switch to gas, which she loved. So, okay. So what happened is when we lost the Audi, we said, well, look, we need something to get us to the Tesla. So I'll pick up one of these. And then when the Tesla comes in, it'll become your car. Great. So I figured, okay, as long as I can tolerate driving it, I'll be fine. And I've actually rather enjoyed the experience. I'm blown away at how solid it is. It is tighter and has fewer rattles than my A4 did, which was absolutely remarkable. The quality of the interior is not the same. I mean, the plastics are much more basic, and it looks a little bit 2008 iPod is how I would describe the interior design. I have a Generation 1, so anybody who's seen one knows what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I kind of dig it because, I'm a little bit retro nerdy, but it might not be everybody's cup of tea. As far as the exterior panels go, they're solid, but the way the car is, the way the panels connect is not like super, super tight. Like I've had to take the rear taillights out to get rid of a condensation issue. And I found that when you reassemble it, everything is just kind of approximate. And the way the bumper clips into the metal panels and so on nothing is exactly right. But if you look at the panel gaps, the doors, the hinges, all that sort of stuff, like no issues with it. Overall, the reliability of the car has been astonishing. It only had one issue, which was about 2 weeks after I picked it up. Was it got this famous, what they call the buzz saw. It sounds like a radial saw being shut off, where when you decelerate, it would load up the thrust bearing on one of the generator motors, and you hear this really annoying whee as it came to a stop. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So being that the car, all of the powertrain, the electric powertrain stuff is warranted 8 years, it wasn't a problem. It went back to GM and they replaced it under warranty. It's just a little, it's a $90 bearing apparently on one of the electric motors, and that cleared up. But that's been the only issue with the car. And I mean, I beat the living hell out of this car. I've laid rally routes in it. I drive it summer, winter, and I drive it like I stole it. It's like I'm used to a 300 horsepower A4, so this thing is just constantly foot to the floor, and I haven't been able to do a damn thing to it. So yeah, it's been a great little car. For somebody who wants an in-between solution, a second car, a backup car, or you're just not fully ready, committed to the whole 100% EV experience, yeah, I'd say go for it. And I would think now, what I'm telling people in Canada is if you're shopping for any other EV, like a Volt or hybrid, I think there's going to be tons of them coming out on the used market now with the influx of people driving them like myself who are flipping the Model 3s. So it's a good chance for anybody who needs a second, third car, whatever of that type.
Yeah, the other thing too is I want to mention, and before I get back on something else here that you mentioned, we're going to start seeing a lot of 2014, 2015 cars, Model S is coming off lease. So if anybody's looking for a car, maybe not be ready or whatever, there's going to be some probably some good deals on some CPOs out there. I just want to go back on one thing that you mentioned. You mentioned the word condensation. I want to talk to the two Model 3 owners and get your opinion or situation with your cars. Have you noticed any condensation in any of the lights? Because on my Model X, and it seems to be a common thing on Teslas, I've seen it on Model S, I've seen it on Model X, even mine. When I wash the car, there's always a little bit of condensation in the bottom, like not like water accumulation, but it's condensation on the interior lenses. And in direct sunlight, after a while, it just kind of burns off. So I don't know if they're not sealing them or not 100% sealed, or maybe they've got some kind of vent or whatever to let the condensation out, but it seems to be a constant problem. So what about Mike and Eric? Any comments on that on your cars? Have you noticed this?
Well, Mike, I'll let you go first since you've had your car longer.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to report that I wash the car literally every single week and do in between cleanings as well. I can't stop. I've seen no condensation in the lights. I even did a 450 mile round trip, so let's say 200 miles coming home, a road trip with a lot of rain most of the way. No condensation at all in the lights. I was really happy about that. And just not that you asked about condensation inside, any issues with inside the car, seals, perfect. No noise, no water getting in, really just solid. Everything's really tight and no issues at all.
Good. Glad
yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. It's definitely a very sound vehicle, both inside and out. For us being here in South Florida, we're used to a very humid climate, and there are many mornings where I'll go out to my car and there's just condensation all over the exterior of the vehicle. So much so that there are days where I just sit in the driver's seat and the wipers just start going on because they're trying to clear the condensation off the car because it's rain sensors. And I haven't noticed a single droplet at all, either in the lamps, in the car. I'm just nowhere. It's perfect inside and out.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that.
On panel gaps, it's a really funny thing. I've been on car forums for a long time. Actually, I had an Audi A4 as well, like Ian had. And never, ever did I see conversations about panel gaps until I joined the Tesla forums just a little over 2 years ago. And then I became keenly aware of the fact that other cars have them too. Not to minimize the fact that I've seen Teslas with panel gaps, but just a quick anecdotal story. My mother Just traded in a Range Rover. It's about 4 years old, ready for a trade-in. And I was helping her take some things out of the car, and I looked at it. I said, wow, I never noticed this before, but because now I've been brainwashed to look at panel gaps, her back door, the chrome window trim, was about a half inch off from the body panel. I mean, really bad. She had the car for 4 years. I never noticed it until the day she was getting rid of it. But now I drive around and I look at every car's panel gap. So I don't know why that's happened, but I see them everywhere.
Yeah, it's funny. I had the same thing on my Lincoln. I mean, the panel gap on the hood was particularly interesting because right where the hinge is, and you get the standard 1/4 inch, but then you got right down to the ends, and it was on both sides, and literally both metal of the hood and the fender were almost touching. Not to the point where the paint was rubbing off, but I thought, something's a little off there. It sounds like Ian, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, this, speaks to the mania of everywhere you turn, somebody's always trying to get an angle on what's wrong with Tesla. Whether it's like they all catch fire, or autopilot will kill us, or, now it's panel gap gate. I mean, it's like the thing of the week. It boggles my mind.
Yeah,
but,
it just never ends.
Yeah, that's it. It's just mania, because it's like, to everyone's point, we all have stories about different cars we've owned or have seen on the street today that have the same gaps or worse in some cases. And it's not an issue because there's hundreds of thousands of them, and hey, they're not a story. Tesla always is, anything for clickbait.
Yeah.
I sort of theorize the reason behind it is people tend to be fearful of the things that they don't yet understand. And so just like when I was a kid in school being bullied by kids who sort of felt like I was superior to them, they wanted to try to bring me down to their levels. So they found ways to sort of create that control. And so when you have that as your kind of your MO, and other folks seem to look at Tesla and go, wow, they're really doing something. Let's try to find a way to make them even with everybody else. That's where stuff comes out. And even like the tiniest little thing, like condensation in a lamp, can become a bigger story than what it actually is, just because, again, it's the elephant in the room, and people wanna knock it down.
Well, as they say, clickbait sells, right? All right. Well, I think it's time to move on to the next one. I think it's a pretty good segue. The Monroe Associates. Have you guys watched the Autoline YouTube channel once in a while? They get Sandy Monroe comes on, and his company is Monroe Associates, and they do these teardowns of competitive cars, and they sell the information to competitors. And I remember watching, I think it was a couple years ago, they did the teardown of the BMW i3. And there's a lot of really interesting technology and information in that. But, of course, he got a hold of a Model 3, and it was an earlier model, of course. And, of course, one of the earlier videos that they did, he kind of trashed it a little bit. But in the intermediary time, they've had a chance to actually do the teardown of the car. And there's some interesting tidbits that basically come out of this. Basically, in a nutshell, Sandy's was saying that everything below the floor pan, meaning battery pack, drivetrain, electronics, autopilot, the tech was just like top notch. He says, yeah, exactly. And the other thing that he said that Tesla was really still suffering from is what he calls the dinosaur tech, which is, kind of the bodies, building the bodies. And in some ways, I kind of agree. But by the same token, my opinion is that, Tesla's only been making cars for 5 years now? Think about it. And look how far they've come in 5 years. So I think, the dinosaur tech thing is a solvable problem. In the next 5 or 6 years, I would say that, Tesla's body construction would be just as good as any of the Japanese or German manufacturers. That's just kind of my opinion. Anyways, any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, I sort of agree with that. I think when, not just even how long they've been making cars, but also just the number of cars they've made in that time span. I mean, the Roadster was a very, very small number of cars, and then you started seeing the S's and the X's come out, and now we're seeing the very first major production vehicle in the Model 3. So they're slowly kind of growing into the idea of actually having a mass-produced vehicle in the market, where these other manufacturers have been doing it for decades upon decades. So it's easy to see where Tesla's sort of having those growing pains of now becoming a major car manufacturer. But to me, when you're talking about EVs, when you're talking about a revolution, it starts with the technology. And when Monroe is basically saying this computer, this chip, the processor inside this vehicle is is scaring people. It's really changing the way we think about electric vehicles. Yeah. It sort of takes the dinosaur tech comment and says, all right, well, they're not perfect. There's things they're going to learn, but oh my God, this other thing, watch out, everybody. They're doing something that's going to change the way we think of the automotive industry. and that's not something I think we can take lightly.
No, absolutely. I think part of the other thing too is that I think people are kind of losing focus. They're looking at the trees rather than the whole forest. I mean, Tesla is a relatively new manufacturer. They've been making cars. I mean, they've only been in business for 15 years, making cars really, 5 years on their own. The Roadster, you kind of have to set it aside because they were just doing assembly. They weren't doing actual manufacturing of the body itself and stuff. So I think what's happening here is that, Tesla's experience and growth is being compressed into 15 years, and other manufacturers have been doing this for decades, 100 years, whatever the case may be. So you have to give them a little bit of slack in sometimes, but it just seems like because they've grown into this large what's the word I'm looking for, cachet kind of name brand kind of vehicle or company, that people are just kind of setting them up on a pedestal. And of course, their business model was always, let's start at the high end and then work our way down. And that's a sound business model from a startup's perspective, especially in the automotive business, because it's very capital intensive to get into. But if you're positioning yourself as a premium automaker, there's some things that have to come along for that. And then Tesla's still suffering from some growing pains, I think, particularly in the service department area. That with this advent of the Model 3, they just don't have enough service areas. So I'm glad to hear that the quality is good for the most part, but when they have issues, what kind of wait times are we going to see? I mean, we're seeing reports. I mean, I just got a report from somebody on Twitter privately. They said that he had a problem. I forget what it was. I don't have it in front of me here. Something about a bumper or whatever, but he's not going to have the car for 3 or 4 weeks because they just don't have the parts. So that worries me a little bit. And I'm hoping that Tesla fixes that as soon as possible before too many of these cars get into people's hands. So any comments on that?
Well, I would just add my dad also has a Model S 75 with the mustache, so pretty recent. Just looking at the evolution from that car to my car is pretty incredible. Now, don't get me wrong. I love his car. I would take his car. But just little things that they figured out along the way. He's got the next gen seats. If I'm wearing a watch, I can't really move the seat well. Like it's too tough to get your hand in to move the seat, or the visor doesn't have a light in it. So just little things that they've figured out and picked up along the way, I think have made a big difference. But I think they have nowhere to go but up. I'm excited to see the Model Y, probably my wife's next car. So I want to see it sooner rather than later. But I think just each next car we see, they're just going to get better and better and better. And already, obviously, we're fanboys, so I feel fine saying this, but I'm blind to other cars on the road. All I see is the Model 3 right now, or Model X, Model S, and Roadsters. But they just need to make more cars, because I need to figure out what my next car will be however many years later.
And to kind of, if I may, to piggyback on that point, Michael, is that we're also seeing a lot of the tech and the design of the Model 3 now kind of creeping their way into the next iterations of the S and X, hopefully, and with the Semi. I mean, we saw the dash of the Semi, how minimalistic it was for a semi-truck, and a lot of that is because of what Model 3 has created. So I think as they become more and more entrenched as a car manufacturer, and as more of that design studio team puts out the product they're putting out there, we're going to see the cars continue to evolve, and it wouldn't be long, I think, before other auto manufacturers, whether they're EVs or not, take a lot of what Tesla's done with their design and go, we're gonna use some of that, because apparently there's that insatiable need to have that in cars now. Maybe less is more is what we're gonna start seeing.
I think the Model S for 4 days, and I was driving it around, loved the car. But I noticed I didn't like having something in front of the steering wheel. I liked the center screen.
Really?
For the longest time on the forum, the big question was, will it have a HUD? We don't like not having something in front of us. If it doesn't have a HUD, I don't want it.
Uh-huh.
I am so in love with this center screen now that if I see something in front of me, I don't want to look at it. So I do see that change probably coming, like you mentioned with the semi and seeing the way the Roadster's kind of laid out with the dash. But it's really transformed my vision and how I like to look at and sit in a car with no buttons and kind of nothing in front of me. I really, really like it, especially at night.
I agree with you 100%. I was just thinking the same thing today when I was driving home. I was just looking at the center screen, and even though it's the vertical screen, I thought, man, I could never go back to anything with buttons. This is just so nice. It's like, you know, and we're starting to see it now. We're starting to see other manufacturers. You know, you drive past and you'll see an Acura go by, or a BMW or Mercedes, and they all have that little pop-up screen now. They're all kind of doing that. They just need to, to stretch it and stuff. So I think in a lot of ways, what we're seeing with Tesla is some of their design cues are going to start infiltrating the rest of the industry in some respects. Now, the industry might be a little bit different. I usually compare it to the cell phone business, because prior to the iPhone, for example, everything had buttons and flip screens and all the other stuff. And today, everything's an iPhone. They all look the same now. So it's kind of hard to differentiate them. So I think in some ways, the automotive business might take some cues from what Tesla's doing. And you're absolutely right, Mike, that as soon as I saw the Tesla Semi and I saw that interior, I said, yeah, we know what's coming down the line for the rest of the products. Of course, we saw the Roadster too, but the Roadster even has this even more austere, futuristic design, steering wheel outside, but that slit, that, and the creature comforts, of course, on the Model 3. We started seeing some of that stuff put in the Model X, specifically the pockets in the doors, of course. So, now you have coat hooks and the usual pockets behind the doors and stuff. So that's some of the stuff we're going to make its way into the Model S and the X eventually.
They're not happenstance. I think what we've gotten grown to is that we see like a lot of parents who have young kids, and the kids can just grab the parent's iPhone or iPod or whatever, and they just start touching it, and all of a sudden they can get in, and they open apps, and they do these various things, and the parents go, I don't understand how my kid can do it. Well, humans are known for taptic connections. We're known for reaching out and touching things. Our sensory perception is to absorb the world around us and learn it by touching, tasting, feeling, that sort of thing. So I think what Tesla's done is basically saying, well, we understand our basic human need is to touch, to contact things. And the idea of dials and buttons and all kinds of weird stuff is sort of very blasé. We're going to revolutionize that by doing the thing that we've always been doing, which is taking our mobile devices, using these screens, and saying, okay, let's now put that into a vehicle, and to take the S and X design and say, okay, you guys have had two screens before with information. We're going to condense it down to the one, and we think we're going to design it in a way where everything you need to see and need to access is really within a matter of 2 or 3 touches, and you're there. And I mean, I know when I first got the car, it took me about an hour or so to understand where everything was in the menu, to understand how to get there. But after that hour passed by, I mean, it's bep. It's quick contacts. It's very accessible stuff. And for the most part, I only touch really 3 things. I'm touching the stick to activate TAC or autopilot. I might be controlling the radio station and changing the station, or I'm playing with the AC. That's about it. Most everything else is kind of just good to go for as long as I enjoy the ride. But again, all made easy by just having it in one central hub versus having it scattered throughout my entire dashboard.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's a lot of things about the Model 3 that are really quite nice. I mean, there are some compromises. When you take away one screen, you have to condense some stuff. But one of the things I really like about the Model 3 is when you go into the settings, it's so much better laid out. It's so much more logical. Like I still go on my screen. I've had the car almost 5 months now. And whenever I go to settings, I'm always hunting and pecking, trying to find things. It's like, it drives me crazy. So I'm hoping that some of that design ethos that they've done on the Model 3 comes to the rest of the product line. I would hope so in due time anyways. So it's quite interesting. Ian, any comments, being the odd man out?
Yeah, I suppose.
Ian.
Yeah, that's it. It's like one day I'll know what it's like to swipe.
Well, I think it's important for people to remember that you're waiting for the performance car.
Yeah, I'm going to be the last man standing. It's like, they haven't even said a word. The only thing we know about this car is, there was a tweet last year about the ludicrous button that Elon said yes. That was it. Mm-hmm. That's the last official word. And then, yes, I think it was at Thunderhill Raceway. that one of the guys on TMC who also came in on M3OC and told us, yes, I saw it. It's there. He even got a picture underneath, right, of the front axle and suspension assembly where we saw the airbag and like the front axle, the all-wheel drive. He confirmed it's got the big brakes. So we know those cars physically exist.
Yes.
And I cannot divulge anything else, but I did talk to a person who also saw the car and apparently was in it and said, yeah, it's very, very, very real. So that gives me hope. But I won't go on and on about how long and how painful this is going to be to wait for. Let's come back to your original question. I've been lucky enough to rent a couple of Model S's. When I did the factory tour last year, I spent 2 days in one, which is a glorious experience. And I very easily got used to the S because the S is a perfect transition car, you know, with the center stack and the dash layout, you know, with the stuff in front of you. It doesn't take too long to get used to it. And I found it fairly intuitive after, you know, pecking around for a little bit to get most of the major stuff going. I only spent a whole 30 minutes driving the 3, and that's when Yo-Yo Shea came to town, and that's how we got the chance to measure the car and scan it for wheel fitment and everything. And then he let me drive it about halfway to Ottawa. But I mean, yeah, that was fantastic. At least I had some seat time in the thing, and I got to confirm a bunch of things that I wanted to know. And I have to say, I was not super focused on the screen. The only thing I used it for was occasionally to access the wipers, which I found a little goofy, but I guess you get used to. And at that point, you couldn't do any of the speed adjustments on the cruise control on the wheel. At that point, you were still doing it on the screen, and that was also not intuitive. But I understand now that you can use the scroll wheels for that. So
yes.
I think that would get rid of any of the apprehension I have on that stuff. So, but yeah, in terms of the visibility, I'm with you guys that are driving it now. Within 15 minutes of driving it, it was like you got to just enjoy the fact that it's clear road right out the front. And one thing I've heard from a few people, I don't know if you guys will concur, is it's really cool at night because there's no bright lights in your face. Yes. You have better view of the road because there's nothing immediately there in your field of view, and the screen is dim enough in the night mode that you really have an excellent view of what's outside. So that I'm looking forward to, especially as I like to do a lot of rallying in the winter, and vision is critical. Like, I mean, you know, you're going 80, 90 kilometers an hour on these tiny little icy roads, and being able to spot stuff in the difference, you know, like to keep your eyes adjusted to the outside light. I think it's going to be a great car for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think two comments on that. One is I've had night vision issues for some time. I wear glasses for the most part to have to drive at night, and when I have those LED lamps, and because of the way the car sits, because of the way the lights project on the street, I mean, it's a broader range of lighting. So I certainly see more of the road without high beams on, and it's just as clear as day. And because of the view of the window, because of how the hood slopes down, and I think Trevor's mentioned this before, that for most people who sit in the driver's seat, you're basically not seeing any part of the hood at all from your front seat's perspective. So that being said, the other thing too is not having that display right in front. I remember where the first time I drove at night, it was on the first Wednesday after I got the car. And I'm like, I have to drive at night. I want to get this out there. I want to go for a charge. I want to drive around. And I remember I felt like a kid on Christmas morning, just giddy as hell, because it was like, this is the most surreal thing. Like, I've heard people talk about it, how amazing the experience is, but to finally see it for myself was like, this is the coolest thing. And so I still now want to drive at night. I'm actually glad now, you know, I'm going to be able to work at night sometimes and be like, all right, this is what it feels like. But it is for people who want to have just a clear view of the road. To your point, Ian, it literally creates that safer feel. You know, even if it is only just for a moment, because you don't think about it after you start the car, it's just nice that it's there because it really gives you you're really able to focus on what's on the road in front of you versus what's on the dash beneath your hands.
Oh, nice.
I'll throw in a couple of 2 cents. I've been, you know, privileged to have driven all 3 variants of Tesla's current cars, never the Roadster, mind you. And I get questions a lot from people saying, you know, how easy is it to get into the Model 3 compared to an S or an X? And, you know, it's like the Model 3 to me is like, you know, the 3 bears. You know, this one's too hard, this one's too soft, this one's just right. The Model 3 just feels like, it just feels right. Like the visibility out of the car is like halfway between the S and the X. And that's kind of a combination of, the windshield being pushed so much more forward, the dash being lower and pushed forward, the glass over your head, being a smaller, a little bit more nimble car. I've noticed on the Model 3, it doesn't have that big rail. Like when you open the door on the Model S, there's a big fat rail, and it seems to scoop down quite a bit lower. So I find getting in and out of the Model 3 so much easier than the S. The Model X is a different animal altogether because it's so much higher being an SUV and so on and so forth. But I think for people that, and I had this conversation the other night too at an EV meetup where an elderly gentleman approached me and he says, look, I'm having, I'm starting to have some mobility issues and so is my wife and so on and so forth. What do you think? What car should I be looking at? And I said, well, you need to make that decision for yourself, but if I was looking at a car, I would take a very good close look at a Model 3 or an X if you feel that the S is just too low to the ground. So he'll have an opportunity to take a look at that. So that's just kind of my feeling about the car. I mean,
on a showroom Model S trying to get in the car because the person before had kind of moved the 12-way seat kind of really higher up to see over the windshield. And when I'm like, oh, I'll get in and sit down for a second. And as soon as I sat down, my head just wwent thunk right into the frame of the car. It wasn't.
I don't think that's any fault of the car. That's just because of
not at all.
Showroom car.
But yeah. But that was that's kind of not a way you want to start your experience. But then once I adjusted the seat, I'm like, it was honestly a great feeling. And I've sat like at a Mazda Miata where you want to know what a low car is. That pretty much is like riding on the ground. But no, I think to your point, having seen people get into the showroom vehicles for an S and an X, the one thing that people love about the X, particularly when it comes to the Falcon Wing doors, is just exactly how easy it is for anybody with any mobility problem to get in and out of that car, except for maybe the height adjustment. What a lot of people do love about the S is that if they do like at least feeling lower to the ground, having a sense of really kind of being closer to the road, it certainly provides that. I, for one, went from a subcompact car with just huge views all around me with the windshield and the windows to then getting into now the 3. And I've certainly adjusted where my blind spots and stuff are. But to your point, I for me, and this is just my own opinion, I love the view of the 3 better than the S. But I also can see where if I had given more time, I could also adjust to the S all the same. But when you're going from a subcompact, again, with large panoramic windows to basically a Model S where the windows are certainly a lot more confined to the vehicle, it can throw some people off.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I think what we need to do is I think we're going to close with some little tidbits of information here because Model 3s have started arriving in Toronto. And VIN numbers have been assigned, so there was lots of activity about that. And I was very fortunate to go out yesterday, and I'll show you a picture. That's my ugly mug. And we had about 17 sitting on a Tesla holding lot. And now, of course, the general location of this place is kind of known in the area, so I'm not going to divulge it, but it's not cool to go there. I just went there for 60 seconds, took a quick snapshot and a quick video, and I was out of there. But I just wanted to let everybody know that this is definitely happening. And tomorrow, I'm very fortunate to go down and actually film what I believe is to be the very first Model 3 being delivered in Canada. So one of the owners reached out to me, and he says, I was told I'm the first. So so I'm looking forward to that. So there's a huge pent up demand for Model 3 in Canada, and well, I was told by Paul Carter. He runs the Model 3 Tracker .info website. And I do believe, and I haven't looked at it recently, so don't quote me on this, but I do believe that Ontario, Toronto area really is the second largest reservation stronghold of anywhere in North America. And that doesn't surprise me in the least. There are tons and tons of Teslas in the GTA area. So it's very encouraging to finally see Model 3s arrive here. I'll be honest, they're arriving a little sooner than I expected. When I did my lease on the Lincoln, I kind of timed my lease to try and expire in April of this year, thinking, well, we'll give Tesla, an extra 9 or 10 months to get their you-know-what together. And then, of course, with all the production delays we kept hearing about, I was like, well, I guess it's not really going to happen for me. And then, of course, one thing led to another. And then I decided, you know what, I really should get what better fits my needs, at least for the short term. We'll hold on to the Model 3 reservation, and maybe we'll look at the standard range when it comes out more for my wife. And then, lo and behold, here we are, coming in May, and we're starting to see the first deliveries. And honestly, I wasn't expecting to see anything until really later in the year based on their initial projections. So it's very encouraging. So, and I did get reports that some people in Montreal and Vancouver, which are other, fairly large strongholds, because you have to remember in Canada, we don't have that many showrooms. I mean, we have Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, and that's it. So, for a large, country like ours, that's not a lot of service centers and showrooms. So that's where all the reservations are keyed. And of course, witness here in Toronto, we've seen, 8 or 9 supercharger locations go up in the last 6 or 7 months. So that growth is really representative of where the Model 3 is really lying in here, and that's where Tesla's putting their energies. So seeing them now, we're gonna see a lot of cars in the next little while. And someone told me today that another shipment arrived in Toronto, so I don't know how many are actually there, but we're going to start seeing ramping up. So I've been told that the first handful of deliveries are really going to happen at the local showrooms, and then in June, when the deliveries really start ramping up, they're going to go to the International Center, which is down by the airport. That's where I took delivery of my car, because it's much better suited for holding cars and doing 6 or 7, 12 deliveries all at once. So it's quite encouraging, and I look forward to that.
If I may ask, do you suspect these are more for existing Tesla owners, or do you think there are some first-time owners getting a Model 3?
Well, that's a really good question. I will tell you right now, the first delivery tomorrow, and this may upset a lot of people, is going to a non-current owner. It's just going to somebody who... the one observation is that no VINs in Ontario have been assigned for anybody that ordered 19-inch wheels. It's all the standard Aero wheels. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a shortage or what's going on. So it looks like it's early people. And I just got a report. A friend of mine told me today over private messaging. And Ian, when we were in, do you remember Peter and Suzanne?
Peter and Suzanne, jog my memory.
Older couple, have a Chevy Bolt. We're very excited to get a Model 3 reservation. And they were sitting at the table at dinner, and they said, hey,
yes.
Okay, so they placed their order, and they're taking delivery on Monday.
Really?
Yeah. So they're non-current owners either. So,
Trev, the way I've been watching the production batches roll, it would seem that they like to build one particular configuration at a time. Like when you see them in the production shots, like if they're doing Midnight Silver 18-inch, that's what they're doing. And like you just see all the same color car go down the line, all 18-inch wheels. And then it'll be another color, all 19-inch sport wheels, So they seem to like to group them by exact configuration. Now, I could be completely in the weeds on that, but by judging just by some of the videos and pictures I've seen, that seems to be what's going on. So maybe it so happens that the first few trailer loads that left the factory for Canada all happen to be 18-inch configuration. That's a guess. I'm just pulling that out, But.
Well, you had me in Midnight Silver Club, so I'm just throwing it out there.
That's 3 of us, and I got to say we're going to have to go easy on that because people are going to get real tired of. What are these guys always talking about the gray? Isn't there any other color? No, there isn't. There's only Midnight Silver.
Hi-ho, Midnight Silver, away!
Gray's the new blue. You notice all the other manufacturers are putting out blue cars. Everybody's blue cars. Well, Tesla is like gray is the blue. That's what everybody wants. I'm not denigrating blue. Don't get me wrong. Interestingly less, silver seems to be the least popular color.
Because we all you know what it is though, they teased us with that gorgeous hyper silver color, the prototype, which was stunning. I mean, I'd stare at that as my screensaver all day long.
I agree with you. Yeah,
we all knew that wasn't going to be a real color because
I agree with you. I saw it in person. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
The minute I saw it,
Speaking of color, interesting. So the Tesla put out a promo video yesterday, their quarterly all hands video.
I was going to mention
and
that.
real quick. there was, there's that all matte black version of the Model 3 that was inside that kind of like a warehouse, empty warehouse.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they're going to now bring that back for perhaps a performance version of the vehicle that we saw at the original unveiling in 2016.
Well, there was a lot of talk about that originally when when they did the original reveal, and Elon was tweeting the first tweet storm, of course, and people were saying that's a cool color. Are you going to bring it to production? Elon said, yeah, it seems to be quite popular. We might consider that. The thing though is that if you've never experienced a car with a matte finish, and it's not the paint, it's the clear coat, they're notoriously persnickety to take care of. Yes, yeah. Look, do that again, Ian, so everybody can see. Yeah, don't go there.
Yeah. No, I have a Honda Blackbird sport bike that I painted matte black to match the plane of its namesake, so it looks like an SR71 color. I painted it with the red trim, and it's horrific. I mean, you can't do anything if a bird craps on it or whatever. You can't polish it, you can't touch it up, you can do nothing to it. Just the very act of washing it starts to develop these little glossy spots. It's the most horrific finish to maintain. Yeah. And I know other manufacturers who've offered matte finishes, like BMW's done it on special versions of the M3.
They call it Frost.
Yeah, they all have their own funky name for it. But even Hyundai did a special edition Veloster with that color. And you have to sign all these waiver forms saying you're not responsible. They're not responsible for anything. Like, don't come back to us with anything to do with a finish issue, because we're not going to talk to you. You're completely on your own. So,
yeah, it's a pretty bad color to be dealing with. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Take us down a tangent, but Ian, you're spot on with the batching. In my experience, when I configured, I got a VIN within 30 minutes. We've seen some people waiting 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. So it's all about kind of the luck of the draw when you configure which car came out of the batch, and you can get lucky and get it really quick, or it could take a little while. But it's an interesting thing. I noticed that Elon had tweeted. Someone tweeted to Elon and said, what's going on? I'm an owner, or I'm an early reservation, and I'm seeing people who are online reservations getting ahead of me. So I thought it was interesting, not, like I said, not to take us down another tangent, but what other CEO would say, yeah, we messed up. We did not follow the order we said we were going to. I'm personally looking into it. Maybe the same thing happened again in Canada a little bit. It should be all current owners, and I'm sure some current owner wanted aero wheels. It's not like they're all going to get 19. So something maybe went wrong a little bit. At the end of the day, we're all going to get cars. Everyone's going to get cars. But the fact that he could admit that something didn't go exactly right and can look into it, I think that tells a lot about this company. Any other CEO probably isn't on Twitter, probably isn't answering customers' tweets. And I love that about the company, that even when there's a little mistake like that, there's transparency, and they're going to fix it and take care of it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Good to know.
Yeah, and to give context, Michael, for you had your VIN within 30 minutes. I received the email to order my car on February 22nd. I didn't receive my VIN after placing the order for about a month. And then I received delivery of my car on April 27th. So about 8 weeks of time passed between email to delivery. So, it certainly can vary. Apparently my Midnight Silver just wasn't ready yet. It needed the final touches for a month or so. But it's, patience is a virtue. And I know a lot of people are waiting on their cars very patiently, especially for certain versions of the car. Trust me, folks, the numbers are going to get there. You'll eventually get your car. If I can wait 2 months, it makes the 2 years seem like nothing. So we'll be fine.
Excellent. Well, I think that's the top of the hour, folks. I think we should sign off. And not in any particular order, let's go with Ian. Where can people reach you on the internet if they want to hang out with you on the forum or on Twitter or whatever social media you're at? Give yourself a plug.
There are 3 possibilities. The primary one being Model 3 Owners Club. You will find me under the handle Mad Hungarian. My specialty there is wheels and tires. So if you have questions at all, please come one, come all. I'm happy to answer them. That's about the only thing I'm an authority on when it comes to Model 3s at this point. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's at Ian Pavelko. Maybe at some point, Trev, you can add that in the notes or something afterwards when this goes to report.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. And I also have a Facebook with my name is that. I'm not so much active on there. It's mostly my personal stuff. But hey, what the hell? If you want to throw a shout out, I will get in one shameless plug though, which everyone must be sick of at this point. You know where I'm going with this. It's
love my shirt.
The fundraiser shirt. Yes. Trev has one, and we got to get you guys some. But yeah, this is a little project I started a few years back when I camped out to be first in the door in Montreal, and I had a tent with the same logo on it, and it just went viral, and everybody loved it. So I thought, you know what, let's do something fun with it. So I started a fundraiser on Teespring, and every one of these that we sell, about $6, which is almost all of the profit in it, goes to Electromobility Canada, Plug-in America in the US, and my homeboys here in Quebec, l'AVEQ, Association de Véhicules Électriques de Québec. So it's for a good cause, and you can show people your hip. And there's 4 different versions. You can get Model 3, Model S, Model X, and I even did a Roadster. So Roadster people, don't let me hear you say you've been always left out, okay?
Yeah, don't leave them.
They're there. So yeah, you can go to Teespring, teespring.com, and just look up Mad Hungarian Evolve shirt. You'll find that.
I'll try and remember to put a link in the show description. So yes, thanks, Ian. How about you, Eric? Where can people find you on the interwebs?
So I'm certainly findable on Facebook, but the easiest thing, the best thing to get a hold of me is on Twitter at ECFix. That's just ECFIX on Twitter. Feel free to. I appreciate all the new followers I've had there. But if you follow any of these guys, you'll see me there too. But Twitter is. See, I can't. This is the hardest thing. Twitter is the best way to get a hold of me. ECFix.
Excellent. Okay, how about you, Michael? Not least. Tell us about your situation. Where can people reach you?
You could find me on Trevor's Model 3 Owners Club forum. SoFlaw Model 3. I'm one of the moderators on the forum. And on
Thank
Twitter,
you for that.
Michael R. Oh, absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you for having me. On Twitter at Michael R. Bodner. Just like Eric, if you're following Trevor, you're going to find me. I think I reply or retweet everything Trevor puts out there. And
we're all guilty of that.
Yep.
And the last thing I'll say, it's not a plug for me, it's a plug for Trevor. I just want to say thank you very much for having me as a part of this podcast, and also for helping me get through 2 years of waiting, joining me at my delivery. Just your friendship, your tweets, your posts, all of the efforts you do. I don't think anyone realizes how much time you spend thinking about Tesla, electric vehicles, and everything in between that goes with it. But just thank you for everything you do and for allowing me to be a part of it.
Oh, you're making me feel a little funny. Oh, well, anyways, I want to say a big thanks to all of my guests. I want to say thank you to Ian Pavelko, Eric Camacho, and Michael Bodner for joining us tonight. And we will reach you out again next week. And we're going to try and make this every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, or wherever you happen to be in the rest of the world. We hope that you join us for the next podcast. And we will mix up the guests a little bit in the future. We'll have some special people coming in, and we'll mix it up a little bit. Anyway, I want to say thank you for everybody, and don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle's at Model 3 Owners. Our website is model3ownersclub.com. And if you like the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because all that stuff matters, because it gets the word out for everybody to participate. And lastly, if you'd like to support the channel and keep this thing going, because software costs money and hard drives are a fortune, we appreciate if you take a look at our Patreon page, and you can find that at patreon.com/Model 3 Owners Club. Anyhow, with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining the panel again, and we will catch you next week. So thanks, folks, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you later.
Bonsoir.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.